Recording in progress. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Renee Garrett, and I'm your Speech Therapy PD podcast host for Brainstorms, Functional Neuro Rehab for SLPs. Before we get started, we have a few items to alert you to. Each episode is 60 minutes and will be offered for zero point 0.1 ASHA CEU. If you're joining us for this live episode and your state license requires live CEUs, please be sure to complete all course modules, including the one that says complete course by the end of the day on your Speech Therapy PD account. Here are the financial and non-financial disclosures. Farwa Husain is the founder of First Phrases and the owner of One-on-One Speech Therapy, LLC. She receives an honorarium for her presentation tonight on this podcast. Her non-financial disclosure is that she serves as the president of the Morris County Speech and Hearing Association and is a member of the National Black Association for Speech, Language, and Hearing in Basel, as well as ASHA and ASHA Special Interest Group 14. Now, we don't have special interest groups, but we'll disclose that anyway. My financial disclosure is that I'm the owner and founder of BrainBridge Connect, LLC, and as the host of Brainstorms and other educational webinars on Speech Therapy PD, I do receive financial reimbursement. I'm also an adjunct instructor at both James Madison University and Old Dominion University. My non-financial disclosure is that I am the secretary for the Communication Disorders Foundation of Virginia. Questions can be written in the chat box or the Q&A and will be answered throughout the presentation. Now we welcome our guest, Farwa Husain MS, CCC, SLP, who is the founder of First Phrases and the owner of One-on-One Speech Therapy. She specializes in neurodiversity affirming care and echolalia support. She designs nationally recognized interdisciplinary programs, including the Connect and Play Summer Intensive, and is an international presenter providing professional development training for schools and organizations. Farwa also serves as president of the Morris County Speech and Hearing Association and has been recognized as the 2024 Clinician of the Year by NBASLA and an innovator in the field of speech language pathology by ASHA. Farwa, so great to see you and great to have you on the show.
Hello, Renee. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody that's on. I hope you guys are nice and warm and cozy here in New Jersey, and I know in Virginia, we're very, very cold.
Very cold, very not having a good time.
It's nice to be home, though.
Yes, for sure. And thankful that we didn't lose power nor heat. So that's not the case for all of our colleagues, our coworkers, and our certainly not our houseless population, as we know. So, um, yeah, I just appreciate you being here with us. I know that you typically work with the pediatric population, and so you and I had a couple conversations about um, kind of branching, not branching really for you, more branching for me to kind of figure out how not only first phrases, but just what your specialty is can move into the adult world. But before we get into all the smart people stuff, as I like to call it, would you mind sharing with us how you got into the field of speech language pathology?
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So this was many, many years ago. And I was studying at the University of Texas at Dallas. They have a great speech therapy program, and I wanted to do something different. And I thought I was going to go to medical school. So I went through the speech therapy program, and I realized it was so much fun. And it was so nice to do something that not a lot of people had done, and there weren't a lot of bilingual therapists at the time. There wasn't a lot of education for my community on what speech therapy is, and everything was, oh, you know what? They're a boy, they'll outgrow it. So unless you have a child that needs speech therapy or an adult that has had a stroke or needs feeding
Right.
therapy or anything else, we don't know about this field. So I went through the program, and I then was an SLPA, and I moved to New Jersey for a boy and went to graduate school here at Columbia. And that just started my love and journey. Did the bilingual extension. And when I was When I was practicing, I was one of a handful of clinicians on the East Coast that were, BIPOC. And I think in our state, there was one other clinician. So I had never met a clinician of color. I had never
Wow.
met a bilingual clinician until much, much later in my career. So it was just about showing another side to speech therapy, just being able to support more families, being able to support more, and just bring education that it's okay. And like all cultures, all languages, and the way you do things are okay, will give you the right support. And then I really dove into my private practice because my child needed support. So I took a break from speech therapy. I was overworked, tired, didn't think I was going to do anything. I didn't think I was making a difference in the world. And then my child needed support. And being on the other side of the waiting room, you realize, what if we do it a little different? What
Yeah.
if we try a strength-based approach? What if we try this? At the same time, my father-in-law had had a stroke too. So I was really diving into getting back into speech therapy. And I said, what if I just picked up one little kiddo? What if that one little kiddo has formed this beautiful and unlocked this new potential in me and passion in me that I didn't even realize? And it was just, I just wanted to support my child and be able to support others. And now my kiddo is a straight A student, given the right environmental supports. And it's all about creating the right environment for our families and our children.
Yeah, no, that's so funny because I didn't know the answer to that question. So I'm so grateful for you sharing that because I'm also on the caregiver side of things first before I became an SLP. And it really does truly make a difference when it comes to the education piece and the making sure the supports are there and that the training for utilizing the supports are there because that's often, at least in my experience, was the big missing link for our family. So
And we
that's
can
really,
translate it so much better because we understand it.
yes,
Like, I know you're not going to be doing this because you got laundry, dishes, and everything else to do. Like,
right.
we're going to just simplify it. Let's make it easier and practical.
Yeah, no, but I think that's really cool because like I said, I didn't know the answer. So thank you for sharing that.
I
And
have
so,
another story to share,
oh
which is
yeah,
going to lead into
I love
this
it.
adult conversation. So, when I decided that I wanted to start a private practice, there's a shoulda, woulda, coulda that always comes about. Like, you always think about that one kiddo that you saw or one adult that you saw that you're like, man, what if I did something a little bit differently? So, this one student kept showing up in my heart, in my mind, in my dreams. He was the first kid I ever saw out of graduate school. I was my CF year, and I saw him, and I thought I was like A plus plus clinician because I did all the worksheets, and I said, quiet hands, quiet mouth. We gotta sit and we gotta learn the scripts. And we have to, if he was ever using echolalia, if he was ever scripting, I'd say I'd ignore him. And I would just focus on functional language and making sure that he was talking. Well, I called him back. I called mom up many, many, many years later. And at that time, when I had started working with him, he was like 8 or 9. And at this point, he was 24. So I called him and I was like, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm starting a private practice. Do you mind bringing him in? And he was like, and I was like, scholarship amount, not going to charge anything. I just really need to try it a different way. We had started this whole new journey in the field on neurodiversity affirming practices. We were just starting to talk about echolalia as being meaningful. And mom goes, all right. So the first thing he does looks at me and goes, no speech, no speech, no speech. And I was like, oh no, oh no. So that led me into the conversations we are going to have because a lot of things that I learned about echolalia in adulthood is from firsthand experience as a clinician and then as a friend, because him and I share the same birthday. So we go to Cheesecake Factory every year for our birthday as well. So we'll
And
get into what happened after that, but
yeah,
no speech ended up becoming having fun with Farwa.
And I love that because I have a I worked well, I did my clinicals in a our children's hospital pediatric outpatient clinic here, one of the many. And I have kind of similar, it's not a therapy story necessarily, but my favorite client with autism that I worked with when he was 8, 9 years old as a student clinician, he and I share the same birthday. And for some reason, I don't share my birthday with a lot of people in
Yeah.
April. And for whatever reason, there's just not a lot of folks. So that really clicked with me when you said that before, when we kind of were email chatting about what we wanted to do with this podcast. And it's funny because I've kept in touch with his mom, who happens to be a distant relative of a neighbor of mine's daughter or son-in-law. And so it's just like our worlds have collided several times beyond where I was as a student, which is crazy. Because you kind of feel like at that point you're meant to be, right? You're meant to interact and commingle with this person over these different phases of their life and your life. Um, but the thing is, he has autism, and now he's 25, and at the time he was 8 years old. So, ooh, I just dated myself so badly. But
I
it's
did
been so
too.
interesting to see his journey from when I knew him at his elementary school age to
Yeah.
see where he transitioned through high school and the transition program out of the public education system into his 20s, and he's
Yeah.
just such a different human than what people told his mom he would be able to ever achieve.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, and
That's
it's really
amazing.
cool. And she still comes back now and will like uh give me credit, which is crazy because I never wanted to work with kids. But she always lists me as a person of like that was influential for their family, which I think is it's flattering, but it's also like very humbling because that's not what I thought would ever be the case. I thought I sucked. I was a
Yeah.
student. I didn't want to work with that population at all. So I think it's the reason that I really wanted to do this with you was because we get these correlations and these life experiences that our patients have where we think maybe one thing and then something else has changed and something else happens and we don't even realize how much when we're truly invested and we do the work and we really think about what does this client or patient need for their life, how can we be impactful in that? And I don't think it's an ego thing. We're not thinking about it in those terms. We're thinking about it as how can I make myself a better clinician so that I can serve this patient and help them have a life that's fulfilling and meaningful and they can communicate more effectively. And I think that's for me what the bottom line is and what it's all about.
And it's so powerful too. It's such a, and we're in this field because we truly love what we do and we love taking care of our clients and it brings us so much joy. And I always say for clinicians that tend to be like overwhelmed and forget, like you are the answer to your family's prayers.
Mm-hmm.
They want their family member to communicate and connect. And now all of a sudden you come in like a ray of sunshine and it's such a magical experience and I the sentiment of humble is resonates with me very much.
Yeah. Well, and so I think let's talk about echolalia and how, oftentimes you mentioned that this can occur in a variety of different neurological disorders, but in the past, I think the thinking was that this is a behavior we want to get rid of. We want to extinguish this, especially in the adult neurogenic population. So if you're looking at a different framework, how does that shift kind of, well, let's start from the beginning. Kind of define echolalia and then maybe look at the viewpoint of echolalia as we shift our clinical interpretation. That's kind of a twofold question, really.
Yeah. So echolalia is defined by a repetition of utterances produced by others. There's three main kinds of echolalia. There's immediate echolalia. I say something, you say something right away. Let's go, let's go. There's delayed, which can happen minutes later, hours later. For my friend, the first thing when he remembered me and saw me was like, no speech. That was from before. That's delayed echolalia. And this can There's the main purposes for delayed echolalia is for social interaction, to connect with others, to process language, and to hold space, for turn taking, and also for regulation. So a lot of times, no matter what age you are, sometimes you will, nowadays, the kids are calling it brain rot. If you don't know that term, it's just something you've heard and you're repeating it over and over again just to help regulate yourself. So that's a form. That's one of the reasons we would use delayed echolalia. And then it goes into mitigation, which means you're taking a chunk of something you've heard and a chunk of something else you've heard and putting a new phrase together and communicating with it. So it might be you may have an adult that is trying to communicate. They want to go up and they're singing hickory dickory dock. The mouse went up the clock because they couldn't come up and retrieve the words for I want to go up or get that for me. And then they might want to add something else over there. So it might go hickory dickory dock, mouse went up over there. Those two smash ups are called mitigations. So Temple Grandin, who's an autistic advocate, says most of her life she communicated in mitigations. She just took a chunk of this and a chunk of that to put her phrases together. So typically, echolalia, if we're talking about in the autism community, is now being seen as something meaningful and purposeful and as a stepping stone to get to flexible language. Now, for other neurogenic conditions like aphasia, praxia, echolalia, repetition, there's new studies coming out that are saying that we should be looking into it and using it to our advantage because they're rehearsing it and using that repetition to learn that language again. So across the board, the field is shifting and saying, instead of extinguishing it and realizing that it's a behavior, a negative behavior, what if we take it to our advantage? Like, how can we use this? And that's been kind of my journey I've been on, being like, well, how can I use it? Kids, I got it. But it's so much more different when it's with an adult because they have a system, a language that they have already established, especially if you're looking with a neurodivergent individual, because now they're communicating in a set framework that they've established themselves. So how can we use that echolalia and grow it to something a little bit more flexible? We could talk about that too.
Well, and it's interesting because I've told this story before on the podcast, but I've had stroke patients in the past who, and this is, to me, this makes total sense when you say that. I've had kind of two schools of interesting things. Well, there's been way more than that, but like two things pop into my head. One is people who repeat jingles, like commercial ads, who have aphasia, and for whatever reason they'll go to answer and they have this commercial jingle that pops out because they've heard it and it's in their brain, it's embedded, and it is a form of echolalia when they repeat it like that. And then there are the other people who often will not be someone who maybe used curse words in the past, and the curse words pop out like automatic speech, and usually it's the spouse and sometimes the children of the person who's had a stroke, and they're always like, "Oh my God, like you never said that word," or "I've never heard you use that word," and I had a
Those
patient.
are the fun ones, Renee, I have to say.
They
That is
they
so fun because you're like, okay, I'm going to use this to my advantage. Go ahead, curse me out.
Yeah, but what was interesting is one of my and this, I don't think I was a CF. I think it might have been like year one, my post CF. I had a stroke patient who um was someone who used curse words who really didn't use it a lot, and it kind of became like his thing. And one of the CODAs that I work with, so certified occupational therapy assistants, she look, I worked with a dream team in IPR. I really did. I was so fortunate. I learned so much from everybody on the team. But a couple years later, the CODA was working in acute care, and the downstairs outpatient clinic was at the big hospital and not at the IPR anymore. And she called me after work and she said, "Hey, you'll never believe who I ran into today." And the first thing he said, and she told me the curse word, and he was like, he was couldn't get past it because he was so excited to see her, and he just kept saying it. And then he's like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I'm sorry."
Oh, it's
But it was
because it
so
carries so much
funny.
emotion, though. If you
Yes,
think
it
about
was
it, our
so
words
salient
carry
for
an
him.
experience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's just
Yeah.
letting you in that emotion. I just love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's it's a perfect place because I think for so long people would get offended or get upset, especially family members when they heard people say that who weren't typically um someone who would use that kind of language, if you will, but it was somewhere for some reason it was the thing that came out, it was the thing that was authentic language, and it was the thing that they recalled when they saw this person who was at a particular journey in their stroke recovery. And I think it's so interesting, and I'm excited for the research that's coming about for this because authentic language, for communication growth is so important, not just in childhood, but in adulthood. You think about the language that we used before we went to graduate school, it's completely different. Even if you were in a different career like I was, my professional language was completely different than what I use now. Um,
Yeah.
and so how is that kind of related between authentic language use for kids and authentic language use for adults? How is that critical for our growth?
Yeah, so I love that you're calling it authentic language because it is meaningful and it is needed and it is a stepping stone to flexibility in that language. So for adults, if we're okay, for children, echolalia is seen as a first stepping stone in a foundational language, and it's seen for everyone across the board until about 36 months of age. For our adults that haven't been able to unbundle, I call it borrowed language because you're taking language from everything that you've heard previously, you're holding it and then you're recalling it at a different time to relay a message based on an experience. So you could have watched the show Frozen, let it snow. And then it's really cold outside when you're saying, let it snow, just to recall like this is cold, and you get the feeling and the meaning behind it, which is very authentic because now you're sharing an experience with
Mm-hmm.
another person. So a lot of it is just being able to share that moment and the experience and the emotion, and you're going to attach the words that you've previously borrowed and heard, whether it be from a TV or you've seen. And many adults will actually also act it out with their bodies, and it's considered like gopraxia, where they act it out if they can't have that flexibility or within their mouth words just yet, or be able to retrieve that flexible language. So
When I,
that's the bigger difference. And then with the, oh, sorry,
no, go ahead.
the other thing that I was going to add is many times if a adult has autism or Down syndrome or is neurodivergent, they'll start realizing because most everybody wants to connect, right? They'll realize that the way that they're speaking, and if they're just scripting everything, because echolalia is considered a script, things that they've heard, delayed echolalia, scripting, gestalt, it all means the same thing. It just means I'm borrowing language. What'll happen is that they've somebody has made a face at them or shut them down or told them not to talk like that, stop that, that's not right, why aren't you talking normal, don't say that. A lot of their echolalia and their scripting will go underground. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll start hiding it and it'll go into palilalia or whisper scripting, where it's barely audible. And they'll do it just to regulate themselves and they tend to shut down a little bit more. So for adults, we also need to think about giving them access to AAC, giving
Mm-hmm.
them other modalities to connect, to authentically communicate what they're needing to do, or wanting to communicate when they haven't gotten to flexibility of language.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I worked in the adult community with adults with intellectual and other disabilities for about a year and a half. Um, and these are folks who were participating in day support programs, living in group homes, and it was very eye-opening because it was utilizing a different skill set for me, and that's why I'm always excited to share these types of things, because that was one of the things that connected me to you, was looking at what you were doing and thinking about how, a lot of my clients at that point were not supported by a family, like a biological family, but they had their
Mhm.
own set of different type of family, and they were not always in the same community. So maybe they had an AAC device in their early 20s, and now they're 28 or 30, and they're not in the same community. COVID happened, and a lot of folks got moved around and shuffled, and unfortunately, that's the real world in the adult disability world, where people aren't living in their biological home. Maybe they don't have biological parents that can A, take care of them, or B, they're not living anymore. And so they're in these more, it's not really an institutionalized facility because it's not a skilled nursing or long-term care, but it's supposed to be more person-centered. But maybe they had an AAC device, and for whatever reason, that AAC device got lost or didn't travel with them to the next place. And so I think that's when I started learning a little bit more about the natural language acquisition framework, and kind of thinking about how we really shouldn't. There's so many things that we don't know, until we need to know them. And we're, as clinicians, we're always experiencing new things and learning new things and having to figure this out. But also, we have this access now to be able to do that with the internet, and such great research and such great resources for analyzing the research, like Speech Bite out of Australia, for example, where they're reviewing this research and making sure it's valid, right?
Yeah,
It's
Dr.
evidence
Hemsley's doing
based.
that. Mhm.
Yeah, it's designed in a way that is actually true research. Is, anyone, I hate to say it like that because it sounds terrible, but really anyone can get published. If you have a great study, and you can get it published through a variety of ways and spaces and places, but that
That
doesn't mean
just
it's
blows my mind.
right. I
That's
know.
crazy.
I know how hard I had to work to like get anything. Like, I'm
But
in the middle of doing something right now, and it's still
but that's kind of the beauty of it, right?
right. Yeah.
You put something out and then you have to validate it. And then
Mhm.
it's okay to say, it's not working, let's try something else. And the crazy thing is there's about a 14 to 18-year gap for research to practice.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to think about the things that we're doing now is going to show up in textbooks in 2040.
Hmm.
Blows my mind. So we are kind of pioneering the way for adult echolalia practices, neurodiversity affirming practices, relationship based practices, because we're still trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
And I think that's so powerful as a clinician and actually being on the ground doing it.
Yeah. Same. So talk to us about natural language acquisition and just those core principles, because I know that you and I've had like a little brief conversation behind the scenes of how natural language acquisition is one thing, and then like GLP, or 'cause
Gestalt language processing.
yeah, if I say GLP, they'll think I'm talking about weight loss. But that's more of a term of an identifying term
Yeah.
versus a methodology or a process of how kids and adults are
Hmm.
expressing
Hmm.
their language.
Ooh, this is so exciting. Okay, so let's go over key terms. GLP is Gestalt language processing, and it describes how neurodevelopmentally an individual that uses delayed echolalia goes through delayed echolalia into flexible language. Now, ASHA used to consider this as another way of language development, whereas we are taught that children learn words, they build phrases, sentences, and then bigger, longer chunks, longer flexible language. The other way was, what if children learn a script, then they mix and match it? So they use delayed echolalia, they mix and match it, get to single words, and then they build their flexible language. And that was considered Gestalt language processing. So recently, as of 2024, end of 2024, going to 2025, December, ASHA pulled that stance and said, we don't support Gestalt language processing as a developmental language learning approach. Since then, many autistic individuals consider Gestalt language processing as their identity. I use scripting to communicate. I use delayed echolalia. I am a Gestalt language processor. So for adults, Gestalt language processing is considered an identity form. And now what the field is moving into is using Gestalt language processing more of a colloquial term. Like if we are speaking to a colleague who knows about it and be like, oh, he's a Gestalt language processor, which means he used delayed echolalia and he's scripting a lot. And we have to get them to flexible speech, how you and I are communicating. So that's Gestalt language processing in quick terms. Then there's the natural language acquisition. It used to be called framework. Now it's just natural language acquisition. And it is created by Marge Blanc, who's a researcher who said that there are, and states that there are 6 stages, and it's a description of what happens to individuals that use delayed echolalia. So stage 1, if you're following the natural language acquisition, is an individual scripts, uses delayed echolalia. They call it gestalts, meaning the scripting that an individual is doing is emotionally tied to an experience. So it could be that every time I leave the house, my mom or a family member or a caregiver said, it's time to get out of here. So every time I leave the house, I have to say, it's time to get out of here. And that is my script. It can also be considered TV talk, delayed echolalia, but mostly if you're following NLA, it's called gestalts. So that's delayed echolalia. For the autism community, they prefer to use the term scripting other than delayed echolalia or even the term gestalt. So the first part, the stage 1 is delayed echolalia. Stage 2 is when an individual realizes that they can mix and match and mitigate their delayed echolalia. So it's time to get out of here, can go, it's time to go outside. And then they'll start isolating and realizing that each word means something, which moves them into stage 3, and it's single word isolation, which is noun plus noun or noun plus location. Glass, there, green, sweater. And then for stage 4 is starting to put their own phrases, and it's all about experimental grammar. 5 and 6 are all about complex grammar. So stages 1, 2, 3, and 4 are what Barry Prezant spoke about in his description of what happens with delayed echolalia. Marge Blanc added on those last 2 stages. So initially, before 2024, those that were using the NLA were using NLA as a framework. I have to move this child or adult. At that time, there wasn't anybody working with adults with echolalia. And when I had started to even think about doing echolalia, I was the only one in the world documented that was working with an adult. And at that time, he was 25. So it was like, well, we don't know what we're going to do. Here's a description of what it is. So let's just try to follow it and figure out if it's right or not. What's the worst that's going to happen? It's based on relationship-based intervention. So it's everything on the NLA framework is itself evidence-based. The whole framework is still in question. We're still trying to figure out the research and say, does it align with neurodiversity affirming practices? Do individuals need to go through each stage? Individuals can be in multiple stages at once. So it can get a little bit cloudy if you are just diving into it. So that is the NLA framework. There's 6 stages, and it's a description of what happens if you're using delayed echolalia. I think I covered all that.
Beautifully. I was almost speechless, which never happens. But I think, looking at, in particular, adults, you mentioned relationship-centered strategies. How, if you're someone who works with adults, whether that is a neurogenic communication disorder like aphasia, apraxia, if it's someone with a TBI, if it's even an adult, who is in, I hate to say the system because that sounds terrible, but an adult that is like in Virginia, we follow patients on the Medicaid waiver system, and that's how I came to work with adults with intellectual and other different abilities. Um, how do we follow those practical relationship centered strategies to help that recovery? So I think it's kind of a twofold question because with an adult with a neurogenic communication disorder like an aphasia, apraxia, something like that, you're going to see rehabilitative, and then the adults with aphasia or with autism or we get I worked a lot with adults with cerebral palsy who had birth injuries, who had some communication challenges surrounding that. It's a habilitative. It's not a rehabilitative. It's a habilitative, and so that's two very different things from a system standpoint, but from an SLP standpoint or an SLPA standpoint, it's not all that different in the way that we approach it.
Yeah.
Does that?
Yes. So a lot of relationship-based intervention goes back to attunement and really being and looking at your client as a whole, making sure that we're looking at not just their speech and language, but how are they connecting with their sensory systems? How are they using their body and their gait? And if there's flexibility there, is their nervous system regulated? We need to create that environment where we're co-regulating. We need to create that environment where they feel safe, and then we can layer in all the language support. So I think for both rehabilitation and habilitation, that's very important that we need to do. So we really need to focus on building rapport, building a relationship where they feel safe and comfortable enough to try something new.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I always say, oh, I love how you stretch your brain to try something a little bit different to be able to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. There's a couple questions to the chat, but I want to kind of talk about what you just said because I had a client that I was working with, who was a patient on the Medicaid waiver system, and um, he was the quickest study for an AAC device of any patient I've ever worked with at any age group, any diagnosis ever. And what happened was when we took the trial device to him, because at first he had a history of property destruction, so everyone was very concerned about maybe he's not a good candidate because he's just going to throw it or destroy it or whatever. But there was a lot of other behaviors that had been extinguished once the behavior therapist got involved and like worked through all that. So we worked together on a lot of strategies. But what happened was when we took the trial device into him and I like sat it in front of him, he looked at me like somebody finally figured out that I know how to use a communication device. And he's like thirsty, thirsty, thirsty because his triggers were like coffee, being thirsty, food. He wasn't feeling well that day, so he went from thirsty, thirsty, coffee, coffee, coffee. Like he hit coffee probably 10 times. And he had to navigate through a couple of trial menus because we didn't have it customized for him. And he got to the part where I said, "How do you feel today?" Sick, sick, sick.
Oh, that's
Coffee,
beautiful.
coffee, coffee.
Yeah.
It was so great. Like I just had the best feeling about that whole thing, and it was so rewarding to see that because would usually when I introduce an AAC device, again, depending on what the diagnosis and the age and what the circumstances are, there's a trial of like learn and discover, right? And for him, he's like, oh my God, I'm glad you dummies finally figured out that I can do this and I know how to use it. So
Well,
that
I
was,
do have to say, for me, Renee, in graduate school, I was taught to push for mouth words. We have to get
yes.
them talking.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, with this friend, he was 26 when he got his first AAC system. Nobody in his entire life had thought about AAC because he could labored and it was really tough for him, but he can get out a word or two. But all of a sudden, you're so right. Things start clicking and they just light up. I mean,
Yeah.
our adults and our kids, no matter what, are scrolling and they're going through YouTube and everything else. So why not give them access to another modality, which is really
Yeah.
cool. And sometimes it's not even like we don't, for him, the AAC is great, but what works better for him is Google. Like
Mm-hmm.
he can type up and pull up a Google image of how he wants to communicate. So we have to reframe what communication means, right?
Yeah.
Like
And we
if
have,
you show me a picture and you're telling me that, okay, I went to Olive Garden and pulling up the address and then zooming in on the menu and telling me what you ate, you just told me everything. We're friends. We can do it. And the
yeah.
people that you're most connected with, you tend to talk the least because you are the most comfortable with them too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you answered the question because you put the NLA resources up, but someone did say, have you had clients who use echolalia with their AAC device? And I'm assuming that means were they did they demonstrate echolalia while they were using their device?
Yeah. So echolalia is a repetition and it could happen with your mouth words, but it can also happen with your device. So you may need to be exploring it and pressing that button over and over and over and over again because you're learning it. You may do it because you just love the sound of it. Many times I have clients that will use it as a synthesizer and they'll put a beat to it because you have to realize that echolalia is also are individuals that are drawn to echolalia are love the intonation patterns of spoken
Hmm.
word. So they may just love the tune that they're putting together. So any which way that they're using it, whether they're hitting that same button over and over again, we need to give them a little bit of space to be able to do that and to be able to explore it. It's very similar to maybe even and some AAC specialists will say that it's very similar to child babbling, where they're
Hmm.
hitting that button over and over again. The other caveat to that is sometimes our adults and our older students get stuck in a loop in their mind.
Yeah.
So they may be stuck in a loop if they're hitting that button. You just have to see if it is or not. And we have to trial different things. Is their body that's stuck at that moment? Are they looping in their mind? If it's a certain thing playing in their mind over and over again, sometimes what I'll do is play like binaural beats or some other music or give them a headphones with something else playing to kind of dim down the script that's going over and over and over again. Um, and then we kind of, or if it's like a physical loop that they're stuck in, sometimes we need to just help them out of that. And you may need to recruit and help from your OTs or PTs and get strategies for that.
Yeah. So someone said,
Sorry,
I don't see the
Communication
link.
Development Center. Let me let me pull it up. Communication Development Center has all the resources on the stages and the framework itself available for free. Let me center. And it's run by Marge Blanc and her staff. And if there's ever any questions, they're very great at answering questions and supporting you directly.
Yeah, and I think what it is your answer went to the host and panelists and not the guest or not
Oh,
to
I'm sorry.
everyone.
I
So
did
that's
it
what it is.
again.
Yeah,
I
no,
did.
it's fine. It's fine. So yes, the answer is yes. The communicationdevelopmentcenter.com is where you would find that information. And then we have another one in the Q&A that says, I just started working in the school system this year. I've been working with adults in acute for 10 years. At what age or point do we switch the focus from having the high school student with autism who demonstrates echolalia stop working on formulating complete sentences as a family request to NLA or another means of communication?
So for our individuals that are older, and when I say older, I mean 7 and up, because at 7, you have an established system. Now, what we're going to do is really focus on progress and not perfection. It might be that this individual may not get to flexibility in language, full flexibility, but if they are constantly echoing and if they are scripting everything that I hear, what we want to do is not extinguish or eliminate, but we're going to give them almost shape it into more functional language. What we want to do is give them phrases across a variety of communication functions. Transition, shared joy. We often think we're only giving requests and we get stuck in that, like, I need, I want. But there's so many other ways we need to communicate, especially for our older individuals. We need body autonomy. You're too close to me. Please give me some space. I need a break. When we start building these foundational phrases for our adults, what happens is we start giving them a bank that they can start drawing from and then mitigating down the road. Rachel Dorsey, who's an autistic SLP, spoke at ASHA 2023 or 2024 about her needing these starter phrases to be able to get and communicate the message when her body wouldn't let her. We know 85 to 90% of autistic individuals have gross motor differences. So some days, body will not let you say what you're thinking or what you're wanting. On those days, having these starter phrases, having phrases that you've learned before and have the motor plan really helps to communicate that message. So we start there. So what you're going to do is, if your adult wants coffee and they are scripting the Dunkin' Donut commercial, at that time, there's a few ways you can go about doing it. Right there, first and foremost, what you need them to realize is it's safe for you to script. And I hear you and I see you and it is totally fine. Because most likely they've been ignored, it's been something extinguished, they've been told stop that, they've been told quiet mouth, they've been told a lot of negative things.
Right.
And it's just the facts. So you want to initially just start repeating it, but match the same intonation pattern. America runs on Dunkin'. You're going to say it just like that. America runs on Dunkin'. And they'll look at you very quickly. And then you could say, oh, I really want some coffee. And you're just going to give them what you think that they're wanting from their perspective. Because they're already borrowing language from everywhere else. So let them borrow the words they want to say until they get to flexibility. So I really want that coffee. And we're going to say it more, not academic language, but more everyday language. Right? This is great. I need a hot cup of Joe and see what connects with them. And it may be that they'll repeat it right away. I want a hot cup of Joe. Or they'll just hold it. And later they might do the Dunkin' commercial and then add, I want a hot cup of Joe. Our goal is for this to become delayed echolalia. So next time they're by the coffee machine, they go, I want a hot cup of Joe. Now we've shaped that America runs on Dunkin' and given them something functional to use right away. And that's a good stepping stone into moving them to flexible language. So for my friend, it took about 1.5 years for him to even let me in his world. For him to even allow me to hear his scripting. Everything went underground. Everything was scripting, got very quiet, would not let me in. And then when he did start scripting, it wasn't a lot of great things, a lot of curse words, a lot of sadness, a lot of things that people had said to him that he carried weight-wise. And then slowly, with modeling different functions of communication, transition, shared joy, I really start with empowerment as well. I'm amazing. I'm great. I can do it. It feels really weird when you're modeling from the other person's perspective in a first person because we're so used to doing it the other way. Like, he's amazing. You're so great. You're this. The second I make the shift with somebody truly using echolalia, it really helps connect them to language and it becomes theirs. And then slowly, he started repeating what I was saying. And slowly, it was when he needed something, he would just repeat. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is working. And it's really powerful, no matter what days you go through in language development to give yourself language as like, I got a grasp of it. Because for the first time in his life, when he started isolating single words, he went to mom and went, bike. Mom goes, we're not getting a bike. And he goes, Walmart, bike. He made it very clear that he wanted a bike. That was the first time in his life, 26, to really advocate for himself and get it. He is the happiest camper in his tricycle riding around his neighborhood in his bike. That's powerful. Now, has he
Yeah.
gotten to flexibility of full complex language? No. But where he's at, people are understanding him and connecting with him. And that's powerful. And he himself feels confident in himself. That's powerful. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen with families on expectations.
Yep.
And that part is a little hard, but we need to let them know because then everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. And it's the same in the adult world for neurogenic communication. A lot of our aphasia patients, we use scripting to promote social language. And like you mentioned, menu ordering, for example, I did that for many, many patients. And it's, for a lot of them, it is very powerful when they can practice it because what they're being, depending on who they've worked with, a lot of times they'll be practicing in these full on, like, what would you like to order today, or what would you like to drink? And when this person comes to the table who's very busy and they're a food service worker or server, they're interacting with tons of people from all over the different walks of life, right? They're not going to come up and necessarily use these full on complex communication interactions. They're going to say, what would you like to drink? That's a boom. You don't have to say in response, I would like to order a glass of iced tea. We don't communicate that way. It's not that formal and serious. It would be like iced tea, and they're going to say sweetened or unsweetened. And that's how you practice. And that's how people, like you said, they gain confidence. They gain, it's salient for them. It's meaningful. It's how they interact with their family. And now they can translate that into a broader interaction that's with someone who's unfamiliar, who's an unfamiliar communication partner.
And they've
Um,
learned the motor plan as well. We need to think about
yes.
that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's important too. So giving them these, preset, we all use them. We
Yeah.
have our orders down in different restaurants and different things. You see someone, hey, how's it going? That's a script. We're
Yeah.
all
Or
doing
how
it.
are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm
Yeah.
fine. And 99% of the time I'm not fine, but I'm going to say I'm fine because I
Yeah,
don't know you like
exactly.
that.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, ukulele is used for social interaction,
Yeah.
regulation, processing language.
Mm-hmm.
We all do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just like when we talk about AAC and people realize that we all use AAC every day because our phone is the easiest AAC device. Well, not always, because sometimes it's complex. And the autocorrect hates me. And voice to text also hates me. But the point is, we use it all the time and we don't think of it in those terms until someone else points it out.
Yeah.
But we do have a question. So someone said, when you program AAC devices for adults or older students who use Echolalia, do you add the entire gestalt or script onto the device so they can hit one button to communicate that, or do you encourage them to use the single words to form more flexible language? That is a great question.
That is a wonderful question. What the common now practice is if the individual already has the script, we don't necessarily need to put it in the system because they can already say it.
Hmm.
Now, if we are trying to, the whole goal with the AAC is having them build their language, right? We're trying to get them to use the motor plan and to build and be able to communicate it. But if it's easier for them, we want to put that phrase in the page that it belongs. So if it's like a food item, you are going to put it in the food page and say, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. Having those phrases are very valuable. And then I do have to say that Carolyn and I just might. Toby Dynabox has great,
Yeah.
wonderful free webinars on programming AAC. Carolyn Gaddy,
Yeah.
she's amazing. She's wonderful on programming AAC based on if you have echolalia or not. And she is an autistic SLP, and her children also use AAC as well as herself. So she's got great experience on that. But yes, there's no harm in putting the phrases in. What tends to hit better when it comes to the AAC system is if you're recording your own voice or family members' voices in there, or if they that day can record themselves, that tends to have more buy-in as well. The other thing when we're looking at the AAC, what I will do is increase the pitch and prosody of the device itself so it's a little bit faster and it's more like spoken word because again, our individuals that are using echolalia are really drawn to the intonation patterns. So we're really trying to make it as natural as we can. You can think about adding vocal smileys in there as well. Some individuals will also, and SLPs like to add video clips that are adults like to have more interaction with that device, make it more theirs to customize. So put it in the
Yeah.
page it belongs, not just a separate page. Because it used to be when we were learning about this, we were like, oh, we should create a page and put everything, all the gestalts and all the scripts on one page. Now the common practice is we want to put it where it belongs because that way it's always going to be there and we're never going to remove it.
Yeah, and it's so different for different clients and different patients too, because like for my client I was talking about, he could navigate menus, hierarchies of, where things were and icons. He couldn't do a ton of icons on one page, but he could navigate. It was so interesting because if you put all the icons on one thing, he would look at you like, what are you doing? you know but if you had that high, if you could figure out what his hierarchical system was on how he worked best, how it worked best for him, because again, he was so motivated by coffee and by food.
Yeah.
Those two things were super important, but then he started volunteering for Meals on Wheels, and so he needed his people that he was going, like he needed his teammates that were going with him when he was volunteering. He needed pictures of them, so if he wanted to ask a question about, say, if they weren't there that day, he could hit the button with their picture and their name, and it would say their name, and then he's looking at you like, where's my buddy? Where's my
Yeah.
bro? And it was so, I learned so much more, I feel like, than from him than he did from me, because
Yeah.
he had at some point, like I said, he was at one point throughout his journey, he lived at an autism center in another place. And I'm pretty sure, I would imagine that's where he had an interaction because he was there for the longest period of time. Um, and for whatever reason, his device just never traveled with him, and it took a long time to get him something that worked, because no one was willing to take a chance
Yeah.
on him having that. Um, and it was something where low tech didn't work for him. He wasn't interested in. They had a book with pictures, and he would just take the book and toss it like, psh, like,
Yeah. Most
lady.
of my adults don't want a book.
Yeah,
You
and
give them a phone, give them the
And he'd
notes
already,
app,
and that's
give them
again,
something.
he'd already had at some point in his journey, he'd had a device. And so as soon as we gave him the trial, like we sat it down, and he's looking at us like, God, I can't believe how long it took you dummies to figure this out.
Yeah.
His whole
And I
face was like, seriously?
But I love that point that you brought up of how we need to individualize and really be client centered
hmm
because one thing will work for one and then it might not work for the other client. And that's really important for us to really look as a whole of who you're working with to see how to customize it and see what is going to work.
Yeah, I had another client around the same time who had a straight vocab type. His system had pro low quote to go, and his icons were like 40 something on a page, and he just wanted that. He wanted all that vocab that he could just hit different buttons, and he wasn't necessarily, he was using more echolalia and single words and not doing scripting. His scripting wasn't successful for him. He would tell you all day long on his device, like backpack, backpack, because he knew if he got his backpack, he was going to his day program, or he would hit, he had buttons for food that were related. He liked motocross, and he would
Mhm.
go watch his cousin do a motocross race. And so there was concession stand items that he wanted. So he'd start hitting those single buttons because he knew that would let people know we're going to see motocross and I want this corn
But
dog
isn't
or
that so
whatever.
cool? Like you knew
Yeah.
exactly what he was doing because you were really attuned to him and you knew his preferences.
Yeah, but if you put his language in scripted form, or you put it in a layered system of he had to navigate through several different pages to get to what he wanted, that would have, he would have just given up. He would just kind of toss the iPad at you like, nope, no, thank
Yeah.
you.
That's
So,
true. I think currently there's some new research coming out on how LAMP has been a lot more effective for our autistic individuals,
mhm.
especially the older ones. And then Alan Wu is working on Flex Speech, which is an AI-based AAC application, and it's got multiple languages in it if you have bilingual clients. And it has a lot of predictive text, so it'll predict it so they can put the phrases together in the language and it'll speak that home language. And for the clinician that doesn't speak the language, it has it in English as well, which I thought was really cool.
That is cool, especially if it translates accurately and not.
Yeah, I tried it in a couple of languages and it was, let me see, Flex Speak.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing all this with us. I know we had other things that we could have covered as well, but we filled up our time. And so,
This
Farwa,
is so fun.
it was fun, and I'm so grateful for you and just knowing you and all the great work that you're doing. I appreciate you so much and being willing to not only share your time and your talents, but to translate the things that you do predominantly in the pediatric world into the adult world, because I think it's really important for us to continue to remember that language development is central across different disorders, across different age groups, and across what we do as clinicians. So I really just appreciate you being
Thank you.
here with
And one note is the strategies we use for pediatrics are the same strategies you are going to use with an adult. We're
us. Hmm.
just changing the modality. So it might
Yeah.
be I'm not going to use bubbles, but I might use a weighted ball or something that they have in their environment that connects with them. So it's all about just changing the materials around, but the strategies always stay the same.
Yeah. Nope. 100% agree with you. And just know that you're always welcome back. And I just really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me.
Of course, just as a reminder, if you've joined us for this live episode and your state license requires live CEUs, be sure to complete all course modules before the end of the day on your Speech Therapy PD account. Thanks again, Farwa. It's so great to see you, and I hope you feel better